First, thanks for your patience. Thank you very much. All right. First and foremost, what I want to do, I want to congratulate you, and I want to commend you for this very reason. You're a finisher. You've completed this program. So what I'd like you to do at this point, I want you to turn to your neighbor. I want you to offer them some form of congratulations for completing this program. Some words of future encouragement, okay? Some words of future encouragement to take with them when they leave today. Remember, I'm a patient guy. I don't want you to do a compliment, all right? So nothing else. You're going to leave today with a new friend, right? And then what I'd like you guys to do, I want you to give yourself a round of applause. Feels good, doesn't it? You know, it should in today's society, in today's day and age, most people do have a challenging time following through, and most people have a really challenging time staying through to the end. You know, I recall reading, this was a couple years ago, I recall reading that less than 10% of the people who buy a book, and this is regardless of title, regardless of topic, less than 10% of the people who buy a book will make it past the first chapter. And I think a book's a nice analogy of life, isn't it? Like at times we define different segments of our life as chapters. So maybe we have like this childhood chapter, and we have this, you know, whatever, the adolescent chapter, and the schooling chapter, and the college years, and the dating years. Maybe all these different chapters. For me, you guys know I just entered this new chapter called fatherhood, right? But enough about me. And we came here to talk about you. We came here to talk about your fitness life, this fitness chapter. We came here to talk about your wellness life. Because here's the reality, the program's over. This program has come to completion. And just like any other story, you know, this week, next week, the program's over, but come next week, chapter 2 begins. And here's the cool thing about chapter 2. All the pages blank. The other cool thing about chapter 2 is that you're the author. So you and you alone get to determine which direction this story is going to go. And when I put this thing together, I put this final session together, this designing lasting change. I didn't want to just create this big rah-rah session, right? Get you all fired up for tonight, or get you fired up for the next week or so. Really what I want to do is to be able to provide you with tools that you can apply today, 6 weeks from today, a year from today, tools that would positively impact your life. And that, in essence, is this lifestyle program, right? It's providing you with tools to positively change your life. Now, what you do with these tools after today, not only are they going to determine your outcomes, but they will largely determine the quality of your life. So we go back to this story analogy. And, you know, every good story, every good book, every good movie, there's always like this, things are going along great, and then this villain shows up. Or maybe there's this scary time or this vulnerable time in the story. And that's where we're at right now. The program comes to an end. So you no longer have that sense of accountability, you no longer have that sense of consistency, you no longer have that sense of support. And the other reason why we would say this is a scary time or a vulnerable time is because you've achieved positive results. And you guys have already shared that with me. You've changed some eating habits, maybe your clothes fit different, you're tighter, you're more toned, those types of things. And people say, wait a minute, you know, why would this be a scary time because I've achieved positive results? Stick with me, because what I'm going to do, I'm going to take you through the typical weight loss story. It might have been you in the past, might be somebody you know, but it won't be you in the future because you're here tonight and because you've taken part in this program. What I'd like you guys to do, go ahead and just take a look at the screen here. Then see if I can have you catch the lights. What I'd like you guys to do, just close your eyes for a moment. I want you to take a couple deep breaths. And if you're not comfortable closing your eyes in front of the rest of this group, just go ahead and put your head down on the table. Again, I want you to take a couple nice deep breaths, get as relaxed as you can. And what I would like you to do is, in your mind and only in your mind, I want you to remove everybody from this room. Just you and me. And I want you to see me standing at the front of this room holding this lemon. And what I'd like you to do, in your mind and only in your mind, I want you to see me walking up to you and I'm going to hand you this lemon. So with your right hand, just extend your right hand and you're going to receive this lemon from me. And looking at this lemon, I want you to get a good picture of what this lemon looks like. It's got that little nub up the top, comes to a point at the bottom. It's got all of the lemon indentations that lemon has. And now what I'd like you to do is just squeeze that lemon just slightly. Squeeze it just slightly and know exactly how it feels. Now what I'd like you to do is just place that lemon down on the table right in front of you. And I want you to think of your favorite paring knife. You know that one with the little tip broken off the edge? And I want you to cut right through the middle of that lemon. And now what I'd like you to do is just take up half the lemon, put the nub end in the palm of your hand, and with your right index finger, I want you to make a circular motion and feel the exposed fruit. Feel its moisture and know exactly how it feels. And now what I'd like you to do is same thing with that half a lemon in your hand, the nub ends in the palm of your hand. I want you to bring it up to your nose, and I just want you to smell it. I want you to smell that lemon's tartness and know exactly how it smells. And now what I'd like you to do again, in your mind and only in your mind, I want you to bring that lemon up right by your mouth. And I want you to open as wide as you can. And I want you to take a nice, big bite of that lemon. Take your top, you can do it. Feel that juice moving in your mouth. All right, careful, here comes the light. What's happening in your mouth? Salivating. Woo. Why are you salivating? Carbs. Actually, you're salivating to protect your mouth from the invasion of citric acid. You know what the problem is? You don't have a lemon. There's not a lemon in this room. There may not even be a lemon in this building. But that's how powerful this thought process is. You just took something from the mental dimension and literally created something in the physical dimension. And you see, it's no different than every man-made item in this room. You know, that pen that you're holding, that was nothing but a thought or an idea at one time. It could be said that the chair that you're sitting on, this fancy projector that I have the opportunity to use, even this building. I mean, you and I have the opportunity to be here because one person or a group of people decided to act upon that thought and materialize it into this physical dimension. And this isn't new. Napoleon Hill told us years ago that you are where you are and what you are because of the thought that dominates your mind. And what I want to make very clear and what I want you to understand is this, physically, you're in a different place today. Like if we took your blood pressure today compared to 10 or 12 weeks ago, it's different. If we took your weight, it's different. If we took your body composition, it's different. Blood pressure, cholesterol, all these things, it's different. Because and only because of the way that you think. So we ask this question, well, what is thinking? And thinking is nothing but the series of asking, it's a process of asking and answering questions. That's it. When we ask them and answer them in our head, we call it internal dialogue. You guys have verbalized this, right? You're like, where did I put my keys? Okay. And somebody says, what? But you know, I'm just talking to myself. Somebody cut you off. Right? Somebody cuts you off when you're driving to work. What do you say? What's this guy doing? Right? You're like, what's this? And some of you fill in your own vocabulary. Right? Absolutely. But this internal dialogue is just this process of answering, or asking and answering questions. So 10, 12 weeks ago, some of the questions you may be asking yourself are, in which fast food restaurant should I stop at today for lunch? Or maybe you go out to dinner with some friends, and the waiter comes to the table after dinner, and you think to yourself, should I have the ice cream, or should I have the brownie? And some of you just confirmed this at the very beginning. You know, you told me, I'm asking you and answering these questions. So now maybe the new questions you're asking yourself are, what can I have for dinner tonight? Okay, that's the goal. Or, how do I need to structure my day so that I can get to the gym and work out on time? See, because here's how it works. We have these thoughts, and again, thinking, about 90% of the thoughts that you had yesterday are the same thoughts that you had today, and they'll be about the same, 90% will be about the same tomorrow, unless, as she said, something or someone comes in to interrupt that. But these thoughts ultimately lead to language, and I know this to be true. If someone speaks like a pessimist, they think like a pessimist. The same thing can be said about optimism. The thoughts then lead to our actions. And I know people say, well, they're all talk, but the reality is you talk it enough, and you speak it enough, eventually you begin to believe it. And that's one of the reasons why, as silly as it was, I encouraged you to go ahead and talk a little bit of increase into the person next to you. Speak a little can-do into them, because the reality is when you speak it into them, you then are actually speaking into yourself. And then these actions, when we repeat them, we call these habitual patterns of behavior. They ultimately lead to what? Results. And the fact of the matter is, the reality is, we are all producing results. Now, some people produce results they desire. Some people produce results that they don't desire, but the fact is the fact. And the reality is, we are all producing results, and it all ultimately starts here. It starts with this thought process. Now, here's an interesting question. Here's a woman here. It's the same person, but it's two different people. And it's two different people because, and only because, two different sets of questions, right? Here it's, how do I get through the day? You know, why does this always happen to me? Why am I depressed? Why don't I have any energy? You know, why is life so miserable? What can I, or how can I get through the day? What can I get from the day? Here's somebody, I've got all this energy. Who should I go see? What should I go do? Should I go shopping? Should I go see some friends? Maybe I should volunteer. Maybe I should become a greater contributor to society. But the point is, same person, two different people, two different thought processes. Now this is something I came up with myself. So I hope you guys appreciate it, because I feel really good about it. Our conscious decisions lead to these unconscious actions. But what do you mean by that, Scott? Here's what I mean. Some 10, 12 weeks ago, I don't know how you got here. I don't know how. But either a piece of marketing literature came across your desk, maybe somebody picked up the phone. At some point, 10, 12 weeks ago, an invitation was put in front of you, and you had a decision, a conscious decision. You could say yes, or you can say no. You chose to say yes. The fact that you said yes, that influenced what you had for breakfast this morning, and you didn't even know it, and you didn't even think about it. Somebody just came to the realization as she was verbalizing it, but that's the fact, that's the reality. You made a conscious decision 10, 12 weeks ago, and that influenced your behaviors, and that influenced what you did today. You know, this really became real for me. About 2 years ago, we refinished our kitchen cabinets. And the painter that came in said we need to use oil-based paint so that these things can withstand dishes being banged into them and everything else. Well, oil-based paint smells horrendous, so they had to remove the doors. They removed the doors and they painted them outside. I didn't have any cabinet doors for 2 weeks. For the first week, I'm making breakfast reaching for these imaginary cabinet doors. You know, so we're all on autopilot. We're all so conditioned, and we don't even realize it until someone or something comes in and interrupts this. But Dr. Maslow taught us this years ago. And here's how the change process goes. Here's how the thought process goes. We start off with this unconscious incompetence, and that just simply means that you don't know that you don't even know. And then we go into something called conscious incompetence. And that means that you're now aware that you didn't know. And then we lead into conscious competence. So that might be where you're at right now. You're competent, but you still have to think about it a little bit. Right? You still have to think when you prepare meals. You still have to think when you go out to dinner. You still have to think when you go grocery shopping. And then you go into unconscious competence. You're on autopilot. You don't even think about it. It's no different than driving a car. When you first started driving a car, you probably don't even remember, but when you first started driving a car, you had to think about the left mirror, the right mirror, the rear view mirror. I got to put this thing in reverse. I got to step on the brake. I got to step on the gas. There's all these things that you were thinking about. Now, you drive down the street and what happens? You're like, oh, when did they put that building up? Right? Have you ever had that happen? Yeah. Holy smokes, because you're unconsciously competent. Now, again, like I said, most likely right now, this is about where you're at. And the longer you do this, the more consistent you are, the further you move down the scale, and then the further you move down the scale, the easier this game gets. I mean, and we're all different levels for different aspects of our life. Right? When it comes to taking out the garbage, my wife would probably tell you I'm like right around here. So she's probably like, what's the level before unconscious incompetence? Right? She's like, it's Tuesday night. Every Tuesday night she's got to remind me, right? But when we talk about fitness, I'm probably closer to here. So we're all at different aspects, we're all at different levels. What I want you guys to know is, as you move through this process, now it gets pretty easy. Because it does. It goes on autopilot. Things get pretty easy for you. We talk about questions. Here's a great question. The question is this: what determines actions? What determines whether we're going to follow through after this program or not? I mean, what determines whether we get out of bed and go and work out or not? And Mike Littman puts it beautifully. Mike Littman puts it this way. He says, let's say you got two girls. You got Sally and you got Jennifer. And they both want to get up and go to the gym tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. So tonight at 10 p.m. they both set their alarms for 7 a.m. Well, sure enough, 7 a.m. rolls around and says, the alarm clock goes off, and she says, oh no, it's cold out. The floor is probably freezing. It's raining outside. And she hits snooze and she goes back to bed. 7 a.m., Jennifer's alarm clock goes off. Same thing. She says, oh no, it's cold out. It's raining. The floor is probably freezing. But 15 minutes later, she's in the gym. What's the difference? What's the difference between following through or not? What's the difference between mediocrity or really nailing your goals? And really what it comes down to is this. Sally's focused on the process. She's focused on how hard it's going to be. She's focused on how challenging it's going to be. She's focused on how hard she's going to be breathing, how uncomfortable she's going to be. And here's Jennifer. Jennifer's focused on the results. Jennifer's focused on the reward. Jennifer's focused on how she's going to look, how she's going to feel when she goes on that vacation. She's focused on how she's going to look in that new dress, or maybe how she's going to look in that old dress. She's focused on what people are going to be saying to her. She's focused on what she's going to say to herself when she puts on that dress and she looks in the mirror. So what's the difference? What really determines our actions? And really what determines our actions is what we're focused on. What we're focused on right now. Because I don't know who said it, but it's so true. Whatever you focus on, you're going to feel. And people, this made a lot of sense about 2 years ago, October of 2008. I asked people, I said, for a minute, just stop and think about your 401k. Right? A lot of people were calling it a 201k. Right? How do you feel about that? People are like, wow, I don't feel too good. I don't feel too hot. Same thing, with that disaster in the Gulf. We asked people, people are talking about it, people are thinking about it. Back in May, June, July, they're thinking about, it's going to screw up my vacation, the poor animals down there, all this money that's being lost, and it's going to affect the economic climate. But whatever we focus on, we're going to feel. You guys found that out with the lemon example as well. So we talk about this change process. There's really three things, three core components when we go through this change process that have to happen. The first one is you need to believe you're capable. And here's what happens after 10 weeks. After 10 weeks, you've achieved, if you've applied this at any level, you've achieved some level of success. And the fact that you've achieved some level of success, your belief just increased that this is possible. Then we need a technology that works. And again, that goes back to, that's what this Lighthouse program is about. It's about the technology, it's about tools. That's what it's about. But tonight, this is what it's about. It's about following through. Because I'll say, this is the simple part. It's simple in the fact that you can understand it. It's simple in the fact that you can comprehend it. But the challenge is following through. The challenge is, the real challenge is getting yourself and keeping yourself in the right frame of mind to follow through on the things that you know you should be doing. And the reality is, the facts are, the only thing that stands between where you are today and where you'd love to be, that vision you had in your head from 10, 12 weeks ago, the only thing that stands between where you are today and where you'd love to be is just a series of steps. That's it. And once you get yourself and keep yourself in the right frame of mind to follow through on those steps, we're hitting home runs all day, right? We're hitting home runs all day. So I told you I'd take you through the typical weight loss story. Here it is. The typical weight loss story is this. Step one, get discouraged. Now, why did you join the program? I'm going to tell you why you joined the program. You joined this program because you were frustrated, you were upset, you were confused, you were overwhelmed, you were afraid, maybe you were fed up, or maybe you woke up one morning, you looked in the mirror and you said, come on, Scott. You're capable of more than this. You're worthy of more than this. Right? Here's what we do know. Thomas Edison told us this years ago. Restlessness is discontent, and discontent is the first necessity of progress. Very rarely does something move unless it's disturbed at some level. I don't like the last part. Show me a thoroughly satisfied man, I'll show you a failure. I don't like the word failure. I got my own definitions of that. But I do agree with this. Very rarely does somebody move unless they're upset. Well, let's talk about Dr. Abraham Maslow. He also shared with us that all human behavior is based on your desire to avoid pain or to get pleasure. We all do more to avoid pain than we do to get pleasure. You guys remember the smoking example that I brought up the first time I was in here? And there was somebody in here, I can't remember who was a smoker. Happens every time. I ask, is there somebody in here who was a smoker, smoked a lot, now no longer smokes? Yeah, and the example was, when you went in, before, when you were a smoker, if you hit your cigarette, you'd be upset, right? But now that you go into the smoke-filled environment, that's very painful for very irritating. And it's the same behavior, but there's two different associations. So step one is we get disturbed. And the fact that we get disturbed, we take action. Taking the action means you enrolled in this program. Not only did you enroll in this program, but you made the commitment. I'm going to show up every Monday night at 5 o'clock for the lectures. I'm going to meet with my trainer twice per week. Maybe you started preparing food in advance, maybe grocery shopping on the same day. I don't know what the case may be, but you took action. And in fact, the fact that you took action, guess what happened? You got results. And you guys just shared this with me. You said, you know what, I feel different, I'm thinking different, I'm more toned, maybe the clothes fit different. And as a result of getting results, now what happens? Pain reduces. And here's why I'm bringing this up. The reason why I'm bringing this up is this. What most people do to initiate the pain or the change process is this. They start because they're disturbed or they're upset. And what happens is they fall into a trap. The goal isn't to keep you in pain all the time, but I want to explain something. Because if pain reduces, here's what happens. You lose your drive. And if you lose your drive, you stop taking action at the same level. There's a term in the field of change psychology called overconfidence. And I call my clients on it all the time. Here's what happens when somebody's overconfident. They're moving along, they're doing great, they're totally in action, they're nailing their goals, and then somebody invites them out to dinner. And they go out to dinner with some friends. They have a nice dinner, they order dessert, they have a couple drinks, and then they get up the next morning and they get on the scale, and you know what happened? Nothing happened. So they think, ooh, I got away with one, right? So then you start doing the math. Let's see, I went out to dinner, I had one dessert, I had 3 drinks, and you start playing that game, how much can I get away with without moving in the wrong direction? That's what I mean by overconfidence. That's what I mean by stop taking action at the same level. And if you get caught up in that trap, then it's repeat, then it's disturbed again. That's the typical weight loss story. How do we get out of this? How do we get away from it? Really 2 ways, and only 2 ways. Now, let me share this with you. This is from Dr. Robert Cooper. And Robert Cooper really studies the brain. I mean, that's his work. He studies the brain. He says, good and great are the enemies of possibility. He says, the brain relishes the repetitive comfort of being good, but it craves the accolades of being great. The danger is that once we achieve great, we stop growing and instead automatically clutch our trophies and try to hold on to our ranking only to fall. It's a story of executives, companies, countries, and civilizations. The reasons are hardwired in the brain and nervous system. Exceptional leaders and teams see it for what it is, a trap, and relentlessly grow beyond great to possible, surpassing the best that they've ever given to their work and their world. So how do we get out of it? Here's how we get out of it. Let me share this story with you. Here's a girl who, at 127 pounds, fitness competitor, figure competitor, a lot of people look at that and say, man, she's in phenomenal shape. She's in great shape. That's impressive. It's even more impressive to find out that about 10 years ago, she weighed in at about 200 pounds. She lost about 70 pounds. The message I want you guys to take home from this is just this. This was her first competition. When she got done, I'll never forget, within minutes of this competition being over, she came up to me and she said, hey, Scott, I think I can do better. And that's the take-home message. There's got to be a compelling vision. There's got to be a compelling future. There's got to be something else that we're striving toward. The message isn't that everybody in here needs to be a fitness or figure competitor, but the message is there's got to be some compelling future out there. And we also need to continue to raise our expectations. Maybe you've heard this before. Motivation is described a lot like a thermostat in a furnace. Here's how human motivation works. We all have this personal expectation for our life in every aspect of our life. We all have this expectation. The expectation is not what you think, or not what you hope, and not what you wish. The expectation is really what you believe with every fiber in your being. This is what I'm worthy of. This is what I deserve. This is really what I believe I absolutely must and should be doing. That's your thermostat, is your expectation. And let's say just, in your home, if your thermostat is set at 72 degrees and the temperature in your house is 70 degrees, what happens? Right, the thermostat recognizes that and it signals to the furnace, you need to produce heat until what? Until we reach 72 degrees. And that furnace will continue to produce heat until there's no longer a contrast. We're producing as much heat as that thermostat dictates. It's the same thing with our expectations. It's the same thing with our own personal belief systems about ourselves. Now, as soon as that furnace kicks off and the temperature drops again, furnace kicks on again. And it's always constantly in search of that 72 degrees. Same thing with our own personal expectations, our own personal belief systems. It's Anthony Robbins who says, if you don't set a baseline standard for what you'll accept in life, you'll find it easy to slip into behaviors and attitudes or a quality of life that's far below what you deserve. Earl Nightingale says that success is this progressive realization of a worthy ideal. I think we can very easily reach up there, pull out the word success, and insert this word happiness. Happiness really is this progressive realization of a worthy ideal. Think about this for a minute. Think about the happiest days of your life. The happiest times of your life. And I can assure you, the happiest days of your life were when you had something that was deeply, deeply important to you, and it was that process of closing the gap. It may or may not have been actually accomplishing the goal, but it was in that process of closing the gap where you had energy. It was in that process where you had motivation. It was in that process where you weren't bored, you weren't lethargic, you were excited and you were motivated. Now, it could have been a wedding, it could have been vacation, maybe it was a collegiate degree. I don't know, pursuing a mate, I don't know. But it was in that process of closing the gap. So it's not about attainment, it's not about goals, it's in that process where we really achieve true happiness. And you guys thought you just joined this program to lose a couple pounds, huh? You just found out the meaning of happiness. And it really is. Abraham Maslow says to be ultimately at peace, a person must keep becoming all that they can potentially become. And again, the take-home message is this. The only way that you get out of that trap, there's got to be a compelling future, there's got to be a compelling vision. And what happens with most of our goals in life, any aspect of life, most of them are going to be time-bound. This program was time-bound. You had about 10 or 12 weeks. And now that it's over, unless you set a new vision, unless you set a new goal, unless you have something else to go for, what you're going to find is that you're going to be slipping back into your old patterns, you're going to be slipping back into old habits. We talk about fear and motivation, and that's exactly what starting the change process because you're disturbed. That's where it is, it's fear, right? And unfortunately, we don't sustain high levels of fear for extended periods of time. It pours these catecholamines into our system, these stress hormones. We don't like it, and the fact that we don't like it, we turn it off. We go into this thing called denial. So fear will not get us to produce change for extended periods of time. This is from a book called Change or Die. Really interesting quote. It says, doctors try to motivate patients to change by summoning the fear of death, but that doesn't help when patients are demoralized. If they're in denial, they'll avoid thinking about the problem, and telling people who are depressed that they can live longer if they make difficult changes doesn't inspire them. Who wants to live longer when you're in chronic emotional pain? So instead of fear of death, the sales pitch is this: the joy of living. And what they do, their team convinces patients that they can not only live longer, but they can also feel better. The patients can look forward to enjoying things that make their daily life pleasurable. Within 1 month, they're feeling the joy. True story. I sat down with a guy last Monday, 85 years old. 85 years old, seeking personal training services. What brought you in, sir? Well, I play tennis. I'm a golfer. I like to travel to Europe. I want to continue to do that. This guy's got a compelling vision, right? He says, you know what, you're working with a friend of mine who's about 10 years younger than me, and all of a sudden by the end of the summer, he's whipping everybody. I want to get him next summer, right? 85 years old, this guy's already working on his compelling future. Without that vision, people perish. We need this compelling vision. You guys can write this down. Actually, you know what? I've got, if you guys want to throw your name down on here, your email, I talk about following through. One of the services that I offer that helps people to follow through, I got a newsletter that comes out twice per month. And it's just twice a month I show up with some recipes, some motivation, some different techniques, exercise. If you want a part of that, just put your name on that, and I'll also send you a lot of the different slides and quotes because people like those. But you know what, this is probably worth writing down. Change is never a matter of ability, it's always a matter of motivation. And that's where we come into this fear component. We can get people to change, but the challenge is getting people to sustain that change. And the fact of the matter is, when people go through behavior change, About 90% of the people who start the process will be right back to their old habits about a year from today. So only about 10% of people can sustain long-term change. But change is never a matter of ability, it's always a matter of motivation. There's a guy I used to train, and he was about 42 years old, and he owned multiple different businesses, so he worked hard, he played hard, and what I mean by playing hard is this. He was recently divorced, didn't have any children, so when he got done working, what he would do for pleasure, he'd go out to the local restaurants. And he'd have dinner, maybe have a couple drinks, and talk to the locals. Well, he also had high aspirations for his physical appearance and his body composition, and he set this goal to be at like 10% body fat. And he came to the conclusion, he realized, I'm going out to dinner every night, and I'm eating and I'm drinking, and I want 10% body fat. Those two things aren't congruent. So he was working with another coach, and he explained this to the coach. He said, I really want to get down to 10%. And the coach said, you really want to do this? He said, yeah, I really want to do it. He says, all right, I'll tell you what, pull out your checkbook. I need to have you write a check for $5,000. We're going to set a goal for 12 weeks. If you hit your goal, you get your money back. If not, we're going to donate it to the charity we both deem is deserving of this. So 12 weeks goes by. What do you think happened? He hit his goal, right? We all do more to avoid pain than we do to get pleasure. Right? He goes out to dinner, and all of a sudden, the drinks don't look so good. That dinner doesn't look, or the desserts don't look so good. Sure enough, he hits his goal. Well, now they remove the leverage. You got the $5,000 back. What do you think happened? Yeah, you want to right back into the old habits, right? So we're talking about lasting change. And here's lasting change. That happens when you can link enough pain to that old behavior and or enough pleasure to your new behavior. And our smoking example showed us that precisely. I mean, is there any doubt that you go back to smoking? Like if I had a cigarette right now, would you be tempted? Absolutely not. That's what we call lasting change. So lasting change happens when we link enough pain to the old behavior and or enough pleasure to the new behavior. But here's the kicker. And this might be the most important line of the whole evening tonight. We talk about this evaluation. Whatever we focus on, we feel. We all do more to avoid pain than we do to get pleasure. Most of us will make the decisions based on what's creating pain and pleasure in the short term. Right? That's what we call emotional eating. Stress, you're overwhelmed, you're bored. You're trying to deal with your present situation. And you're making a decision based on how you feel right now. The most successful people in life, and I don't care what endeavor you're talking about, the most successful people in life are those people who are able to make the decisions based on what's going to create pain or pleasure down the road, in the long term. Brian Tracy puts it better than I ever could. He says, all of life is a series of trade-offs. The most successful people trade short-term pain for long-term gain. They're willing to sacrifice in the short term in order to enjoy greater and more certain benefits in the long term. They're willing to pay the price of success in advance and to put off the enjoyment of immediate rewards and benefits to assure that even greater rewards and benefits will be available later. So let's say it's next week and the program's over. And you're like, you know what? I'm following through. I'm going to do this stuff. In fact, you're so serious about it, you put your gym bag in your back seat. Well, you get out of work. It's a little darker out right now, right? You get out of work and it's dark, and maybe it's that cold rain, and your favorite song comes on the radio and you start to relax a little bit. Maybe a friend or a spouse calls you and says, hey, listen, Dancing with the Stars finale's on tonight. All right, we're going to put our selfies on, maybe we're going to pour a couple cocktails, have some dinner, watch that. You got the vision of sitting at home and maybe in front of a fire or something, and then you also got the vision of you're at the gym and your face is red and you're sweating. You're out of breath. In the moment, which one's more appealing? Yeah, the company, right? Well, which action is going to produce the result that you anticipated you would achieve when you enrolled in this program? Absolutely. So I'll send this quote to you tomorrow. You guys can put that in your car, right? Take the red on your dashboard or something. But that's the truth. Most of us make these evaluations based on what creates pain or pleasure right now. Most successful people, look at Warren Buffett. You think he was freaking out over the past 24 months? Now he's loving it, right? He's making these evaluations based on what the long term looks like. People are just fully freaking out. We talk about, how quickly can change happen? In some instances, it can happen very quickly. We talk about the smoker. I'm sure everybody in here has known someone who's smoked for 30, 40, 50 years, and for every year somebody has said, look, you got to quit smoking or it's going to kill you. And the guy says, yeah, whatever. And then all of a sudden one day, he drops to the floor at work, goes into cardiac arrest, and they're able to revive him. And the physician meets him when he comes to consciousness and says, look, you got a decision to make. If you don't quit smoking, you're going to be dead in about 6 months. And here's somebody who can change instantly because what's coming up? Maybe his daughter's going to get married in the next 4 months, or maybe there's a new baby on the way. There's this whole evaluation with pros and cons, this decisional balance. There's this whole evaluation with, what's really going to create pain or pleasure for this guy, not only now, but down the road. So we ask this question, why do people change or why don't people change? And there's really this huge, there's this huge ball of things that need to be considered when we talk about change. But if you want to put yourself in a really, really strong position to make a positive change over extended periods of time, here's 2 things that I would highly recommend. Number 1, you got to come up with a really strong, positive, moving toward motivator. Something that you're moving toward, something that's going to get you excited. Because this is the stuff that's going to get you out of bed 6 months from now. I sit down with a lot of people and I say, what are we looking to accomplish? They're like, I got to get rid of this, I can't stand this. But those are the people, it's fear-based again, right? That goes back. As soon as that starts going down, as soon as those pants start fitting and feeling good, now all of a sudden their pain reduces and their motivator's gone. So we've got to come up with a good, positive, strong, moving toward motivator. And then the other one is this decisional balance. And the decisional balance is just simply this. You just take a sheet of paper and you draw a line down the middle. And you talk about the pros of this behavior, you talk about the cons of this behavior, or vice versa. Pros and cons of changing. And your pros of changing that behavior absolutely have to outweigh your cons. If your pros don't outweigh your cons, you're going to have a really, really challenging time changing, or at least changing for extended periods of time. So what I need to have you do right now is just find a blank sheet of paper. And what I want you to do is write down 20 things that you absolutely love to do. Like, you need to go to work today. If money was no object, maybe it's on the weekend. Write down 20 things that you love to do. If you come up with more, great. If you can't come up with 20, no problem. But just the first things that come to mind, what absolutely must be in your life on a day-to-day basis? What are the things that you absolutely love to do? It counts. Everything counts. This could be anything. Reading a book, spending time with family, watching sports, sleeping, woodworking, shopping, anything. What do you love to do? This is yours. You're taking this home. Nobody else is going to see it. Just 20 things you love to do. If you can't come up with 20, no problem. More than 20, just keep going. And then just for kicks, go ahead and go right down the list and date it. When was the last time you did it? A week ago, a month ago, 1984. When was the last time that you actually did this? Okay, what do you have in front of you? Really what you have in front of you is just a list of your own personal values. And then based on the date, if you're living according to those values or not. So we ask what the value. All the value is this. The value is just an avenue for you to reach an emotional feeling. So maybe you like to volunteer at church. Possibly you have a high value for contribution. Or maybe you're a competitive runner. You like to run. Maybe you have a high value for health and fitness. Or maybe you have a high value for competition. Or maybe you just have a high value for peace of mind. And you know when you go running, no one else can talk to you and you can kind of get lost in your own world. But everything that we do, all of these things that we do, there's a specific reason why we're doing it. And it always goes back to us achieving this emotional feeling. Now we know that values guide every decision that we make. Or they at least influence every decision that we make. And it's been said that these values, it's like this magnetic pole. Our values guide this magnetic pole. So we would say, if your greatest value is security, and the person who works in the cubicle across from you, their greatest value is adventure, you're going to take different vacations. You're going to drive different cars, you probably live in a different home, you'll date different people. So these values definitely influence every decision that we make, and the direction of our lives is really controlled by this magnetic pole of our values. If you ever want to know what you value, take a look at what you do. We can always tell what people value based on what they do as opposed to what they say. Especially if you're in a situation where you have to make a very difficult decision. We can always tell what people value. It's Ralph Waldo Emerson who says, what you do speaks so loudly I can't hear what you say. Actions always speak louder than words. So maybe somebody's there, they're like, yeah, I'm a family man, I'm a family man, I'm a family man, and the phone rings, and someone says, hey, we got a great financial opportunity. They're sitting there eating dinner with their family, but 1 minute later they're out the door. You always tell people value by what they do as opposed to what they say. We see it all the time with this big conflict between honesty and greed. We see it blown up in the media all the time. We see people who are like, man, what a silly decision. Why would somebody of their stature, why would somebody in their situation make such a silly decision like that? And it's always going to come down to what we really and truly value. What's the number one excuse that people use for not exercising? There's either no time or not enough time, right? What's the only thing that's equal amongst all humanity? Time, right? Yeah, we all have 24 hours. Now I will say this, nobody has time for everything, but we do have time for the very most important things. And what really determines what's important to us is always going to come down to our own personal values. So my objective today is not this. My objective is not to try to influence you or try to get you to change your values, but my objective is to get you to understand. And just understand that the things that you wrote down on your list, that your own personal health, your own personal well-being, your own personal wellness hasn't moved up the ladder, a lot of those things begin to get wiped out. And there's a friend of mine who I grew up with. His dad was a golf maniac. I mean, that's all he did was golf. You couldn't even walk in his garage without tripping on a golf ball or a golf club. You walk in the house, it's Golf Digest all over the place. And his goal, his dream was to retire. And then he and his wife were going to move down to the Carolinas. They were going to build a place on a golf course, and this guy could just golf like crazy. Well, this was also a guy who had type 2 diabetes. And part of the golf game included drinking alcohol, drinking beer. And sure enough, Guy reaches his goal, retires, goes down to the Carolinas, builds a place on a golf course. But within a year, he ended up losing his leg, just below the kneecap, and I think 2 years after that, ends up losing his vision. But again, the take-home message is this. I mean, here's a guy, that was deeply important to him. I mean, that was his life. That's what brought him so much joy. But it ends up getting wiped out because his own personal values, like health and wellness, didn't climb up the ladder. But here's an interesting thing. We can all tell what people value by what they do as opposed to what they say. You guys have already taken part in this program, right? The past 10, 12 weeks. So you've already gone through this process of restructuring your values to some degree. I mean, I don't know what you were doing 10, 12 weeks ago at 5 o'clock p.m. on a Monday night, but it wasn't here, right? You were doing something else. And somehow, magically, a group of people who all agree that the number one challenge with exercise is time, somehow, magically, you found an hour and a half on Monday nights here, probably 2 hours with your trainer per week, another hour yourself per week. I mean, you just created 4 or 5 hours per week. So you guys can see firsthand how this whole thing works. So what I'd like you to do at this point, based on what you wrote down, I want you just to try to, over the next 2 minutes or so, identify what really are your top 3 to 5 values. We all need these values. We all need guidance from values. If we have too many, it's kind of like goals. We become diluted. We want to have a few values that we really believe in, a few values that we really think guide us and move us. So just try to identify, what are really, and these aren't all of them, these are just some things to get you thinking. Try to identify your top 3 to 5 values. And then what I'd like to do under that is just identify and create some rules for those values. So what has to happen in order for you to meet that value? And what I want you guys to do is do something that you're in control of. It has nothing to do with other people. So say, for instance, you can't say, I feel loved when other people buy me presents. Right? I feel loved when I'm kind and compassionate to other people. Or when we talk about your health and wellness. I feel healthy, I feel vital when I eat breakfast every morning. Something has to happen in order for you to hit that value. I feel healthy when I exercise 3 days per week. So write down what's the rule, what actually has to happen for you to meet that value. Okay, then in the interest of time, we're going to keep moving forward. And a lot of times people ask me, like, why are we even doing this? Why are we doing this whole value classification thing? What I have found is this. Working with a lot of people come in and they set goals, but their values and their goals aren't congruent. And what ends up happening is they feel like they're self-sabotaged. They feel like they're, anytime they get some momentum, then all of a sudden they're right back to square one. So it's always good to have a really good foundation, understand what your true values are, and then when we set up our goals, we either need to make some reevaluations, reconfigure either our values or our goals, and or both. And then the all-important question is, great, now that I know this, how do I go about restructuring and changing my values? Well, number one, you guys have already started that process because you're doing this. And then I'd also like to share this with you. Again, this is not a change or die. And what they bring to light is this. It's obvious that what we believe and what we feel influences how we act. That's common sense. But the equation works in the other direction as well. How we act influences what we believe and what we feel. That's one of the most counterintuitive yet powerful principles of modern psychology. So what I want you to take away from this is the program's ending. There's got to be a system in place that makes you do smart things. And I don't know what that is for you. Maybe that's getting a gym membership. Maybe that's retaining your personal trainer. Maybe that's buddying up with somebody. If you do buddy up with somebody, you got to get to somebody who's at a higher level than you are. Someone who's going to kind of pull you up and suck you up into their vacuum. If you go with somebody who's on the same level as you or someone who's below you, you know what? It's going to be easy to say, hey, meet me at the gym. How about we go for coffee today? Next thing you know, you're at the coffee shop, right? So we talk about raising these expectations, and part of raising your expectations is getting around those people who are at a level or two above where you're at or where you would like to be. So just understand that. I mean, you guys have already got the wheels in motion, but moving forward, there's got to be a system in place that's going to absolutely make you do smart things. So we talk about these goals. What are goals? Why set them? Why people don't set them? And then, most importantly, how to set them. We talk about goals. The goal is just simply this, the dream with the deadline. You're saying it's not in my life right now. I'd love to bring it in my life, but here's when I would love to see it brought into my life, brought to fruition. Goal setting is by far the most important skill of high achievement, peak performance, as well as self-motivation. What we know is this. We get about 15 to 18 years of formal education, but not an hour on how to set goals. We also know that only about 3% of the population writes them down, or sets goals. Only about 1% actually writes them down. So by the time you leave tonight, guess what? You've placed yourself in a rather exclusive group. Maybe you've heard this before. A lot of people who talk about goals reference this study that was done back in 1953. In 1953, at Yale University, they asked the graduating class two questions. Do you have clear, specific goals, and have you written them down? Interestingly enough, that 3% number came back. 3% responded by saying, yes, I do. 20 years later, 1973, they go back and interview the surviving members. What they found was that the 3% who wrote them down were worth more financially than the other 97% combined. It isn't a fluke. This is a study that proves to be consistent with all of the studies done on peak performance as well as high achievement. We talk about this goal-setting process. Earl Nightingale, who we talked about years ago, used the ship analogy. He simply said this. He said, people with goals know where they're going. It's that simple. And again, he used the ship analogy. He says, think about this. Let's say you have a ship. You've got a captain and crew at the helm. Its destination is mapped out and planned. It's got an aiming point. It has guidance. He says 9,999 times out of 10,000, the ship's going to get to where it started out to. He says, this time let's take another ship. Only this time no captain or crew at the helm, no destination, no aiming point, no guidance. We're just going to start it up and let it run. He says, I'm sure you'll agree with me, if this thing leaves harbor at all, it's either going to sink or end up on some deserted island. It can't go anywhere. It's got no destination, no aiming point, no guidance. It's the same thing as a human being. So why aren't people doing this? Why people don't set them is simply this. Number one, they don't understand the importance of goals. They don't know how. Again, 15 to 18 years of formal education, not an hour on how to do this. The third thing is that they fear rejection. And here's what happens. You get excited about something, you get fired up about something, and you tell people. And more often than not, you're like, why do you want to do that? Didn't you try that before? Isn't that a waste of time? It's a waste of money. You're kidding yourself. I mean, get real, right? And there's a mentor of mine, Bedros Koulian. He talks about this crab fisherman up in Alaska. And he said he was observing this crab fisherman in Alaska, and the guy was fishing for crabs, and he had a bucket full of crabs without a lid on it. And he saw that this crab was moving its way up off the bucket. And he told the fisherman, he says, hey, you got a crab that's getting ready to get out of the bucket. And he says, well, don't worry about it. The rest of the crabs are grabbing and pulling down. I think it's a great analogy for life. There's a lot of crabs out there. They're ready and willing to drag you and pull them down if you allow them. So the take-home message is this. Share your goals only with those who are interested in goal attainment themselves, as well as those people who are going to support you and assist you through this process. Other than that, at least in the early stages, keep your mouth shut and just allow the results to speak for themselves. The last one is they fear failure. And people fear failure because they simply don't understand its role in the success process. And a lot of times, the reason why you got into this particular program is because of failed past attempts. And people just don't understand, again, this failure's role in the success process. Now, maybe you guys heard the story of Thomas Edison when he was going through the process of inventing the light bulb. You know, it took him over 10,000 attempts to do it, experiments. And it was written in psychological journals. This guy needed to be institutionalized. They think he's crazy, he's off his rocker. And a young journalist came and interviewed Edison. He says, you know, they're talking about you in psychological journals. They say they're going to take you away. He said, you've already failed over 5,000 times. What compels you to continue? And his response was, I haven't failed 5,000 times. I have successfully identified 5,000 ways which will not work. Which brings me 5,000 ways closer to the one way that will work. Two key components to goals offer. Number one is control. Brian Tracy says this. He says, the law of control says that you feel good about yourself to the degree that you feel you're in control of your own life. If you feel your boss controls your life, you feel the government controls your life, you feel weak. Right? You don't feel like you're in control. But when you feel in control, you feel strong. You feel powerful. So goals offer us that opportunity to be in control. And goals also direct this course of change. We all know change is inevitable, right? Everybody in here has been to a high school reunion? Change is inevitable, right? And what these goals allow us to do, I mean, we can either become the victim of change or we take advantage of change, and goals really allow us, just like I had that fork in the road, goals allow us to choose which direction we want to go. And then the third key component of this, we got to write them down. We don't write them down, it's just a wish or a hope. It's not a goal. Because a week from now, 2 weeks from now, it's going to fizzle out. And Brian Tracy goes on record and he says, you know, if you were to write down 10 goals, fold up that sheet of paper and put it in a dresser drawer, you could come back a year later and see that 7 of those 10 have actually been accomplished. I tried this, I'm not as good, I get sick. But people say there's no way, how's that possible? Well, the reason why it's possible is this, when you write something down, see, the brain has a part of the brain called the reticular cortex. And this reticular cortex has something called the reticular activating system. That's the big screening device. And this screening device is simply, what it does, right now you don't even realize it, but you're being bombarded by hundreds, maybe thousands of different stimuli. But your brain, this reticular activating system, it screens most of that out and it allows you to pay attention to what you believe to be most important right now. So when we write it down, we now have a heightened awareness for all of those things that are important to us. I remember I bought a new car last October. I was astonished at all the people who had the same car as me right after I bought mine. Right? I just had a heightened awareness for my own vehicle. Same thing as you're shopping for a home. And Wayne Dyer's got a great analogy of the universe. You guys remember those old radio stations, the turn dial? He says the universe is just like this giant radio station. And he says you move down the dial and you got pop, you got country, you got talk radio, you got hip hop. He says just because you're listening to rock doesn't mean that country's not playing. You just got to tune in. And again, what he's going back to is that reticular activating system. So we're going to go through your goal setting process right now. Everybody's got the worksheet, and actually, I think everybody's got them except for me. So let me copy out something. There we go. Got something that looks like this? Okay. And all this is, just like Earl Nightingale pointed out, this is your boys, this is your map, this is your plan. Anybody in here ever built a home? Had a home built? When do they start building a home? When it's done, right? When the blueprints are done. Then I'll just drop the lumber off and start nailing lumber together. The blueprint's got to be done. The house has actually got to be done and complete before they start assembling. And that's the same thing here. This is your blueprint. And just like any other blueprint, you can make changes. But we got to have some foundation to build off of. And when we talk about this, I go through the SMART acronym. For me, it's specific, motivational, attainable, relevant, and trackable. So when we talk about specific, what is it that you want? What's that positive motivator? What is it that you're moving towards? Not what you don't want, but what is that thing that you're moving toward once you leave today? And then we got to attach a deadline to it. When's that going to happen? Is it going to happen a week from now, 3 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, a year? Get to the motivational part. Is this the goal that excites you? And then if not, what reward system's going to? We've had people do everything from people who bought outfits in advance, people have booked vacations, people have gone to sporting events, concerts, people have done all kinds of, and it was very interesting. You guys seen Drew Carey lost like 80 pounds in the last year? I was reading his story, very interesting story just on the change process. But he was talking about how the first, 30, 40, 50 pounds, he was actually rewarding himself with food. So if he hit a certain goal, he'd go out and have this meal. And then he realized how sick and awful he was feeling, and he realized it wasn't a reward, that was punishment. So then he came up with rewards like massages and doing other things that would actually serve him and actually continue to move him in the direction that he was intending to move. Attainable, and this is really, when we talk about attainable, we want to give ourselves about a 50-50 shot, right? Because if it's too easy, we lose interest. But if it's too challenging, we don't even start. So it should be something that's going to scare you just a little bit. You're like, I don't know. I don't know if I can do this. But, boy, it would be cool. So give yourself about a 50-50 shot. The relevant really goes back to our value system. Is this congruent, and is this in line with your current values? And based on the fact that you're sitting here 10 or 12 weeks later, when I pulled in, I saw a lot of cars pulling out. So the fact that you're here with me tonight, I'd have to say it probably is relevant based on where you are right now at this point in time. And then when we talk about trackable, since then we really can't manage something that we can't measure. So when in fact, how are we going to track this progress? Who's going to hold you accountable? Do you have a system in place for that? When are you going to do it? But there has to be some periodic time frames where we're actually tracking this, where we're actually measuring this, we're actually getting some evaluation based on our efforts. And when we talk about, a time frame, whether it's 1 week or 3 weeks or 6 months, what I have found really probably the most productive goal is just been a 1 week goal. That's it. Because in a 1 week time frame, really your brain can't hide. Now all of a sudden every meal counts. Every workout counts. Every night of sleep counts. People set up these 12-week goals, and looking at 12 weeks, it's kind of like, well, I got a lot of time. I kind of slough off for a little bit, and I'll kick it into high gear a couple weeks before. So 1 week goals I found to be very powerful and very, very effective. Your next question. Why do you want to accomplish this goal? A lot of that goes back to your value system. Why is it so important to you? And maybe not only so, who's going to benefit from this? Not only yourself, your family, your friends, your social network. Why is it so important to you that you start moving in the direction that you envision on this, whatever it is, 8th day of November? Third question is, how will you benefit from this? And that's just like the 85-year-old guy I sat down with last week. That's all he was talking about. All he was talking about was how his life was going to be better, how his life was going to be improved, how his quality of life was going to be improved. And the conversation that we had really stemmed from, that there really isn't any clear-cut data that's going to show you will achieve extended longevity by living a fitter lifestyle. But what's very clear is that last 5 to 10 years of life, the quality of life for the people who do live an active and a fit lifestyle is significantly greater than those who are sedentary. And then a part of that question is, how do you feel if you don't accomplish this? I mean, there's got to be some ramifications for you not hitting that goal or not moving in that direction. And that might not only be the impact on yourself, it could be the impact of family, children, friends. Well, I remember I had a conversation with somebody one time. They were talking about they were going on vacation with a group of friends who were in better shape than they were, and they were going to be doing a lot of sightseeing, and they didn't want to hold up the rest of the group. They didn't want to be that person that was slowing everybody down, and they were all excited to see all these different locations and all these different destinations. The fourth one is, what obstacles do you have to overcome? And if there weren't any obstacles, you'd already be there. And I'll share probably the biggest obstacle is this. You guys know who these two guys are? Everybody always knows OJ, right? Yeah. And then this guy's Chris Gardner. You guys know who Chris Gardner is? Seen this movie? It was about 2 years ago. I was on the East Coast, and I was reading this book. It was in September of 2007 or 2008. I just got done reading this book. I'm driving home, and that's when OJ got that big debacle with the autographed merchandise and everything else. So I'm listening to this interview, and it's two different guys talking, and somebody wanted to know, here's OJ, here's a guy with a great upbringing, here's a guy, he went to a great university, Heisman Trophy winner, one of the greatest NFL players of his time, maybe all time, had the movie contract, the endorsement contract, and the question was, what happened? And it was a very simple response. The response was this: he hangs out with the wrong crowd. That was the response. And then I just got done reading Chris Gardner's book. Here's a guy with probably the worst upbringing you couldn't even imagine this. Here's a guy who grows up in the ghetto of Milwaukee. He's physically, mentally, emotionally tortured, beat. But he goes into the Navy, and the one thing that this guy was extremely talented at, he could identify and he could find people who could bring him up to the next level. And he did that in the military, he did that in his sales career. So here's a guy who was really good at finding people who could pull him down, the crabs. Here was a guy who was very good at identifying and finding people who could pull him up. And that's going to be one of your biggest obstacles. One of your biggest obstacles is going to be that social network. So it either means you need to completely disassociate, or as Jim Rohn says, you need to spend minor time or major time. Don't spend major time with minor people. You can still spend time with them, but don't spend major time with them. And this is my favorite. The fifth question is this: what are you willing to do or not willing to do? And what I want you to think about is this: not what you want to do, not what you think you can do, but just what can somebody in your situation, in your shoes, do to accomplish or to achieve what you're attempting to achieve. And just come up with as many things as you could possibly think of. I remember I was training a woman one time, and she was like a 10 o'clock appointment. And here was a person who didn't have much momentum and wasn't really moving in the direction of the goal she said she wanted to achieve. But she called me like on a Wednesday afternoon. She said, "Hey, I can't make my Thursday 10 a.m. appointment. Do you have any other times available?" I said, "Let me get back to you." I called her. I said, "Yeah, you know what? I can get you in at 7 a.m. on Friday morning." I had to hold the phone up to here because she was laughing so hard. She was like, "You got to be kidding me. ER's on Thursday night. I ain't even expecting to call you at 7 a.m. There's no way I'm working out." But you look at this big list of what are we willing to do, or what are we not willing to do, and the people who are willing to do more, we find, move toward their goals a lot quicker, a lot faster. So write down 20 things, not that you think you can do or want to do, but what are 20 things that somebody in your shoes could do to achieve what you want to achieve. And then I recommend that you circle 3 that you'd be committed to doing this week. And then put a little star by 1 that you'd be committed to doing by the time you go to bed tonight. So that could be going grocery shopping. It could be going home and throwing away all the Halloween candy. It might be going home and going for a walk. But what is one action, what is one thing that you could do to move you in that direction? And then again, at the bottom it says the greatest plan in the world won't work unless you do. It's going to take some follow-through. So I'll leave you with this. This is what Zig Ziglar says. He says, all of life is a series of choices. What you choose to give life today will determine what life gives you tomorrow. I know we're cutting it close, but I'll gladly stick around and help you guys kind of sift through some things or answer questions. We'll be able to help you with your plan. So if you guys want to stick around, or like I said, I will certainly make myself available.